On November 12, 1942, in Richmond, California, an entire cargo ship, measuring 441 feet in length, and tipping the scales at 28,490,000 pounds, awaited its launch into San Francisco Bay from the entrance of Permanente Metals Corporation's Yard No. 2. This vessel had come together in a mere 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. By contrast, in conventional shipbuilding facilities, skilled craftsmen had required anywhere from 6 to 8 months to fashion ships of comparable dimensions, a practice that dated back to the era preceding the American Revolution. Nevertheless, at this site, a fully built Liberty ship was poised and prepared for deployment. More than 1,000 laborers pulled away from the framework of the SS Robert E. Peary. These were no seasoned shipbuilders or skilled naval artisans. Instead, they consisted of ex-office clerks, agricultural hands, homemakers, and manual workers who had only recently picked up the skills of welding mere weeks before. Assembled there were dignitaries, reporters, and rival yard proprietors, all drawn together to observe an event destined to unleash a sweeping shift in factory output, a methodical upheaval driven by ingenuity in U.S. industrial methods, its influence rippling through the years to come. The equation for the Allies' triumph unfolded not through tactical maneuvers on the battlefield, but via output figures in manufacturing that upended all the preconceptions held by naval specialists regarding constraints on vessel fabrication, timelines for assembly, and the boundaries of industrial capacity. This shift took its initial steps on December 27, 1940, as Henry J. Kaiser inked his inaugural agreement for constructing ships. He was an individual with zero experience in crafting vessels, no oversight of a maritime yard, and a professional history dedicated to shifting soil and casting cement for enormous hydroelectric barriers throughout the western United States. Nevertheless, this 58-year-old titan of the building industry had boldly assured the United States Maritime Commission of his intent to deliver 30 freighters, destined for the British authorities, in just 2 years' time. Seasoned professionals in the shipbuilding field wrote him off as a misguided chancer. One of the nation's most venerable shipbuilding facilities, the Todd Bath Iron Works, had entered into a hesitant collaboration with Kaiser for the endeavor, confident that their seasoned knowledge would offset his unfamiliarity with the field. Unbeknownst to any of the participants, however, Kaiser's absence of prior involvement in ship construction would ultimately prove to be his most valuable asset. Observing the proceedings was William Francis Gibbs, the preeminent naval architect in the United States, whose company, Gibbs and Cox, had developed the Liberty ship blueprints drawing from British prototypes. Gibbs himself had crafted designs for far more vessels than Kaiser was likely ever to have encountered. The shift from doubt to groundbreaking innovation originated in the design rooms at Todd Shipyards in New York. During their review of established shipbuilding techniques in the opening months of 1941, Kaiser, along with his team of engineers, quickly discerned that time-honored approaches could not possibly satisfy the urgent needs of the war effort. Only a few weeks earlier, Clay Bedford, who served as Kaiser's lead engineer, had toured an assembly line at the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Bedford had observed automobile frames progressing along assembly lines, where laborers fitted pre-assembled parts at every stop. Back in California, he became firmly persuaded that the same approach could apply to shipbuilding. Established shipyard experts dismissed such an analogy as ridiculous. The initial major surprise arose from Kaiser's suggestion to do away with riveting altogether. Conventional shipbuilding depended on rivets, molten metal fasteners driven into place across stacked steel sheets to connect them. A proficient team of riveters, operating in flawless harmony, might manage around 100 such fasteners daily. Constructing a Liberty ship in the standard manner demanded roughly 1 million rivets. In its place, Kaiser advocated electric arc welding, a method he had perfected while laying pipelines throughout the American West. Vice Admiral Emory Land, who led the United States Maritime Commission, scrutinized Kaiser's idea with profound doubt. Letters from his personal files, now held in the National Archives, captured the shipping industry's response. Welding had never demonstrated dependability for building hulls on such a grand scale. The British Navy prohibited its use in warship hulls. Kaiser was urging a gamble on America's logistical lifelines with a method lacking verification. Nevertheless, Land acknowledged the urgency of the situation as well. German submarines and surface raiders were destroying Allied merchant vessels at a rate that outpaced the replenishment efforts of conventional shipbuilding operations. During 1941, roughly 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping sank to the seabed due to various factors. The United Kingdom faced actual famine conditions. With standard techniques, U.S. shipyards needed about 230 days on average to construct one cargo vessel. Under such constraints, the Allies risked defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic long before U.S. manufacturing could mobilize effectively. Granting Kaiser the contract stemmed from urgent need rather than any sense of assurance. From barren tidal flats, the Richmond shipyard emerged fully operational in the span of January through December 1941. Workers under Kaiser's direction, skilled from prior projects in dams and road infrastructure, put up a complex that appalled veteran naval architects. Rather than relying on the enormous overhead cranes and extended slipways typical of long-standing yards, Richmond adopted a radically novel approach. Its design mirrored the efficiency of a car manufacturing line. 7 parallel construction berths were encircled by expansive zones dedicated to prefabrication. The site featured a network of railway lines weaving throughout, built specifically to transport enormous steel components that could reach 150 tons in weight. Towering gantry cranes, each able to hoist complete portions of vessels, were positioned at intervals of 100 feet. In May 1941, John Riley, the lead naval designer at Bethlehem Steel Corporation and a shipbuilding expert with 3 decades under his belt, toured the Richmond shipyard. His assessment, classified as secret back then, blended sharp technical critiques with reluctant praise. Kaiser has disregarded every tenet of optimal shipyard organization that I've absorbed over 30 years in the field, he noted. The prefabrication zones are excessively spacious. The lifting power of the cranes is ridiculously overbuilt. The building berths are far too brief. Still, he conceded, the setup is tailored precisely to his stated goal: the swift joining of pre-assembled parts. The influx of laborers marked the subsequent stage in this transformative shift. Conventional shipyards drew talent from long-standing seafaring locales, where expertise was handed down through family lines over many years. In contrast, Kaiser placed ads in publications nationwide, extending pay that exceeded typical factory salaries by 20%, and vowing to instruct all those ready to put in the effort. In August 1941, the initial teams made their way to Richmond. Drawing straight from the principles of assembly line production, The approach of breaking down intricate jobs into straightforward, repetitive steps turned out to be remarkably successful in its impact. Come October of that year, Kaiser had brought on more than 10,000 employees at the Richmond site, among whom under 200 possessed prior experience in shipbuilding. In contrast, conventional welders typically underwent a 4-year apprenticeship to master a broad array of abilities. Under Kaiser's system, trainers imparted targeted methods for particular jobs in just about 2 weeks' time. Employees weren't required to understand every aspect of welding. They only had to specialize in joining the upright seams of bulkheads, or the flat surfaces of decks, or the rounded parts of hulls, tasks they would perform over and over. Through the closing months of 1941 and the opening of 1942, as these workers accumulated hands-on knowledge, an unforeseen development took place. The duration needed to construct Liberty ships started to plummet sharply. The inaugural Liberty vessel from Kaiser demanded 197 days from start to completion and handover. The second one took 169 days. The fifth came in at 128 days. By the 10th ship, it was down to 97 days. During the spring of 1942, the Richmond facility was finishing Liberty ships at an average rate of 70 days each. Established shipbuilding operations observed this phenomenon with mounting concern, as these novice laborers reached output paces comparable to those of their own expert teams. The method of prefabrication, once scorned by conventional shipbuilders, ultimately demonstrated its remarkable effectiveness. Rather than constructing vessels layer by layer from the keel upward in a linear fashion, the shipyards under Kaiser's direction produced full components at the same time throughout the entire operation. As one team put together a forward bow module in the dedicated prefabrication zone, separate groups concurrently constructed aft stern modules, superstructure units, propulsion compartments, and dividing walls. Once these parts were finished, enormous overhead cranes hoisted them into position on the assembly platforms, where specialized welders fused them into a unified whole. In a 1943 discussion with Fortune magazine, Albert Wooding, who oversaw production at Richmond Yard No. 2, highlighted the advantages of this system. Under conventional practices, installing the engine becomes impossible before the surrounding compartment exists, and that compartment itself cannot take shape until the outer shell is fully formed. A process where every step follows rigidly, one after the other. Kaiser's method enabled simultaneous operations across multiple stages of construction. As one team focuses on riveting the vessel's outer shell, a different group puts together the power plant in an isolated workspace. Once both components are finished, the fully assembled engine gets lowered into the prepared compartment below decks and secured by welding. What once demanded several weeks of labor now wraps up in mere hours. The data from this concurrent manufacturing process demonstrated levels of productivity that appeared unattainable to established shipbuilders. In a typical yard, perhaps 50 laborers would labor for 3 full weeks to fit an engine within the tight spaces of an unfinished machinery bay. By contrast, Kaiser's pre-assembly technique deployed 200 personnel to construct the entire engine along with its support framework in a spacious facility over just 5 days, after which heavy lift equipment hoisted the whole unit into position during one efficient 8-hour shift. Even more unsettling to veteran figures in the shipping industry was how this system disregarded long-established customs in vessel fabrication. For generations, ships emerged from meticulously engineered blueprints dictating every nuance. Instead, Kaiser relied on straightforward sketches, offering only essential measurements, trusting on-site crews to handle the finer points. Seasoned constructors viewed this as outright imprudence. Kaiser regarded it as adaptability. Vice Admiral Emory S. Land, deputy head of the Maritime Commission and a lifelong Navy man, at first resisted Kaiser's pared-down technical outlines. Records from agency sessions captured his shift from doubter to advocate, underscoring how tangible outcomes trumped abstract principles. Back in January 1942, I resisted Kaiser's bid to streamline the blueprint requirements. Vessels aren't cars. Building for the sea demands exactitude. Yet come March, the facilities under Kaiser's command were surpassing our standard outfits by 40% in output. By June, that advantage had stretched to 70%. I discovered that striving for perfection often undermines what's merely good enough. The vessels produced under Kaiser weren't elegant masterpieces. They were simply functional, and those functional ships transported far greater volumes of goods than flawless ones that remained stuck in the building phase. As building paces accelerated during the spring and summer of 1942, a rivalry emerged among the 7 shipyards Kaiser operated throughout California, Oregon, and Washington. Edgar, his son, and the vice president, along with general manager responsible for supervising every Kaiser shipyard, especially emphasizing the 3 in the Pacific Northwest, took charge of the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation based in Portland. Meanwhile, Clay Bedford directed operations at the Richmond Yards in California. These 2 leaders, each intensely motivated and eager for success, launched an unofficial rivalry to determine which site could assemble ships more quickly. By the autumn of 1942, the showdown between the Richmond and Portland operations had turned into a widely watched event. Local papers reported progress in the style of athletic league standings. Milestones in speed were shattered time and again, culminating when the Oregon shipbuilding team completed the Joseph N. Teal in a mere 10 days back in September 1942. Eventually, Vice Admiral Vickery stepped in and halted the velocity contests, labeling them as mere publicity gimmicks that pulled focus away from true output targets. Yet the rivalry had fulfilled Kaiser's intentions. Employees at all 7 locations now felt convinced that exceptional rapidity wasn't just achievable. It was the standard to meet. Then, in November 1942, came the Pinnacle Showcase. While Vice Admiral Land toured the Richmond facility to evaluate output, he casually mentioned to reporters, within earshot of Clay Bedford, that advancements in Liberty ship assembly were impressive, though the latest pace achievement seemed insignificant next to the efficiencies of mass manufacturing in various other sectors. Bedford interpreted the remark as a direct provocation. He suggested to Vice Admiral Land that the crew at Richmond Yard No. 2 would strive to construct an entire Liberty ship, from laying the keel to launching it, in fewer than 10 days, effectively slicing the Joseph N. Teal's benchmark in 2. Though doubtful yet captivated, Land gave the go-ahead, provided it wouldn't interfere with standard manufacturing timelines. For this bold effort, Bedford chose the 47th vessel slated for Yard No. 2. It would bear the name SS Robert E. Peary, honoring the famed explorer of the Arctic. Beginning at 12:01 a.m. on Sunday, November 8th, more than 1,000 laborers, organized into meticulously planned rotations, embarked on a groundbreaking endeavor, unlike anything seen before in the annals of seafaring. The approach of pre-assembly fabrication found its pinnacle in the building of the Peary. All primary elements were fabricated, thoroughly examined, and positioned for use well prior to the moment the keel made contact with the construction platform. The forward portion of the vessel, assembled from over 50 distinct segments, was entirely fused by welding and outfitted with anchoring mechanisms, storage areas for chains, and the living areas for the front crew long before the full integration process commenced. The rear portion featured the finished rudder system, the drive shaft for the propeller, and the accommodations for the back crew. 4 fully formed storage compartments for cargo, each an enormous steel framework in rectangular form, had been prepared with added ballast so they could be hoisted precisely into place. The propulsion system, a massive 140-ton triple-expansion steam engine crafted by Joshua Hendy Ironworks in Sunnyvale, was already secured to its base and thoroughly tested prior to shipment from the plant. In contrast to traditional shipbuilding facilities that required months to progress, from laying the keel to completing the upper decks, the Kaiser shipyards put together an almost finished vessel using pre-made components in a matter of days. By the 4th day of work, the ship's hull stood fully formed. With the engine now in place, the deck structures erected, the cargo compartments fastened tight, and the steering mechanism attached, progress accelerated. Then, on Thursday, November 12th, precisely at 3:30 p.m., only 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes since the keel had first met the construction berth, the SS Robert E. Peary glided along the slipway and entered the waters of San Francisco Bay. Just 3 days later, on November 15th, the vessel was handed over for operational use, establishing yet another milestone with a total time of 7 days, 14 hours, and 32 minutes from keel laying to complete readiness. Among the spectators gathered were prominent figures from the maritime industry, high-ranking military personnel, rivals from other shipbuilding operations, and reporters hailing from various parts of the United States. A significant number of them had come anticipating either a spectacular breakdown or a superficially assembled craft that might appear whole on the outside, yet prove unreliable in practice. Instead of the anticipated incomplete structure, observers encountered a vessel fully ready for action, needing just a few final adjustments prior to deployment. Attending the launch ceremony, Vice Admiral Land delivered concise comments, which newsreel footage duly captured. In those statements, he conveyed the shipbuilding industry's reluctant admission that the old order had been upended. 6 months ago, I would have called this impossible. For millennia, spanning 3,000 years, conventional knowledge in naval construction had insisted that constructing a seaworthy vessel in a mere 5 days defied all reason. Yet Henry Kaiser had rendered that age-old doctrine irrelevant. Moving forward, the United States Maritime Commission mandated that every shipyard under contract implement these innovative techniques. The shift left a lasting and swift mark on the minds of established shipwrights. Those very facilities that, only 18 months before, had scorned Kaiser as a meddlesome novice, dispatched their technical experts to Richmond to examine his strategies firsthand. In December 1942, the head of the New York Shipbuilding Corporation, one of the nation's most venerable and esteemed operations, traveled there to witness the transformation. In a private memorandum submitted to his board of directors, he exposed a total breakdown in the conventional mindset toward established methods. By rejecting the constraints that our sector long viewed as unbreakable, Kaiser accomplished feats deemed unattainable in our field. Rather than honoring shipbuilding as an age-old artisan practice, he approached it like an industrial production challenge. Where we pursued flawless execution, he opted for streamlining. In place of bespoke adaptations, he embraced uniformity. Instead of nurturing inherited skills passed down through families, he prepared large groups of novices for the task. The outcome? Vessels constructed in just a fraction of the usual duration, specifically 1/10, and at roughly 2/3 of the expense. Our choice is stark: integrate his strategies or face obsolescence. Come the beginning of 1943, the reach of Kaiser's innovations had reshaped the nation's shipbuilding efforts. Nationwide, 18 facilities were now assembling Liberty ships through techniques of pre-assembly and fusion joining. By the middle of 1943, the typical duration for building a ship had decreased dramatically, from an initial 230 days down to a mere 42 days. At that point, America was producing 3 Liberty ships each day, outpacing the total displacement that German U-boats managed to destroy. Yet the greatest threat to long-established norms in seafaring industries may have arisen from the makeup of the labor force at Kaiser's facilities. Countless women, people from minority groups, and individuals without prior experience, all of whom contributed to assembling these vessels, stood as a profound rejection of the centuries-old apprenticeship traditions that had long controlled the craft of ship construction. During the height of output in 1944, the 7 Kaiser shipyards together hired around 196,000 employees. Among them, more than 40,000 were female, marking an impressive share of women in heavy industry roles. Come mid-1944, females made up 27% of the manufacturing staff in Richmond. Just the 3 Kaiser operations in the Northwest region had hired more than 31,000 women by the end of 1944. Tens of thousands of African-American employees filled skilled jobs at these sites, such as welding, fitting, operating cranes, and holding supervisory positions, an extraordinary degree of integration in American workplaces during the 1940s. The way Kaiser opened up skilled labor to a broader workforce had effects that reached well past the demands of wartime manufacturing. His shipyards showed that intricate production tasks could be handled by individuals who received proper training without needing years of inherited artisanal knowledge, thereby questioning core ideas about workforce capabilities, expertise, and the structure of industry. The holiday season of 1943 offered yet another striking example of how Kaiser had reshaped the atmosphere in his operations. In contrast to conventional shipyards that paused for 1 or 2 days to mark Christmas, Kaiser's plants stuck to their regular output timelines. Yet, instead of just insisting on labor without respite, his company organized festive events to honor the employees' dedication. Over at the Richmond yards, leaders set up a special Christmas meal in the on-site dining areas, offering turkey, ham, and all the classic sides at no cost to those working their shifts. Representatives from nearby churches came by with holiday singers. The local Richmond City Band put on a show. Kaiser made a personal appearance at the yards, greeting staff with handshakes and expressing direct gratitude for their contributions. Come the middle of 1944, the 7 shipyards under Kaiser's direction had launched more than 800 Liberty ships. Still, the impact of his methods rippled out to influence operations well outside his immediate domain. By this stage, the 18 U.S. shipyards dedicated to constructing Liberty ships had together assembled 2,400 of these vessels. Starting in 1944, Victory ships, an enhanced version that was both bigger and quicker, began to augment the Liberty ship output, relying on identical methods of prefabrication and welding. From 1941 through 1945, the overall output of American maritime vessels surpassed 5,500 units, amounting to roughly 53 million tons of shipping capacity. This immense level of manufacturing left observers at the time in awe, and continues to stand out as extraordinary even today. Serving with the British Admiralty's delegation in Washington, Royal Navy Commander Joseph Kenworthy observed the American shipbuilding efforts with a mix of respect and jealousy. His dispatches back to the Admiralty, which became public in the 1980s following declassification, vividly conveyed the British viewpoint on the overwhelming superiority of U.S. industry. The United States is constructing merchant vessels at a pace that outstrips the total output of every other nation worldwide. Kaiser by himself generates more tonnage each month than the whole of Britain's shipbuilding sector. Their methods strike the Admiralty as rough-hewn. The resulting ships lack grace, yet they stay afloat. They transport goods, and they number in the thousands. In contrast, the Royal Navy crafted the world's premier warships through time-honored artisanal skills, with each one demanding years to complete. The Americans, however, churn out serviceable vessels in mere weeks. When serviceable ships come by the thousands, they surpass the impact of flawless ones produced only by the dozens. Yet the true wonder of Kaiser's post-war evolution lay in what unfolded once the conflict concluded. Experts steeped in conventional thinking foresaw the end of the wartime shipbuilding surge, bringing a sharp downturn, with tens of thousands of laborers jobless and numerous expensive yards left to decay. Events bore out part of that forecast. The manufacture of Liberty ships came to a close in September 1945. Come December, the number of employees under Kaiser's command had plummeted from 200,000 down to under 20,000. Those Richmond shipyards, which at their height had drawn in 100,000 laborers, lay mostly deserted come the spring of 1946. Nevertheless, the expertise forged amid the urgent wartime initiative endured. The methods of prefabrication, the welding methods, and the strategies for simultaneous assembly that Kaiser had innovated evolved into routine elements of shipbuilding worldwide. As Japan and South Korea set about reconstructing their seafaring sectors during the 1950s and 1960s, they examined Kaiser's Liberty ship program closely and integrated his methods as the bedrock of their own operations. The enormous shipbuilding complexes in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, destined to lead global vessel production for generations, traced their lineage straight back to the groundbreaking techniques of the Richmond shipyards. In his landmark 1972 analysis, John Bunker, a maritime history professor at the State University of New York Maritime College, captured the enduring impact of Kaiser's contributions. Henry J. Kaiser ventured into the shipbuilding sector as a complete novice, unfamiliar with seafaring customs, free from the shackles of traditional expertise, and eager to introduce industrial production methods that the entrenched sector deemed unsuitable for crafting vessels. Within just 3 years, he oversaw the creation of a greater number of ships than the United States had managed throughout the whole of the preceding 100 years. Even more crucially, his innovations reshaped the global practice of shipbuilding for the rest of the 20th century. The techniques of modular building, pre-assembly, and fusion welding that he introduced have since become the norm everywhere. Today, shipyards around the world, from those assembling cargo carriers in Korea and petroleum carriers in Japan to luxury liners in Europe, rely on methods that trace their origins back to Kaiser's Liberty Ship initiative. The sheer scope of his accomplishment becomes evident when examining the figures that highlight both the program's vast output and its extraordinary efficiency. Data on production indicate that 2,110 Liberty ships were completed in 18 U.S. facilities from 1941 to 1945, reaching a high of 1.8 vessels per day during the busiest periods. The facilities under Kaiser's direct control, 7 in total, accounted for 1,490 of those ships, representing 27% of all U.S. merchant vessels constructed during the war through agreements with the Maritime Commission. Build times dropped dramatically, from an initial average of 230 days for the earliest Liberty ships in 1941 down to 42 days in 1943, while the fastest example, the Robert E. Peary, took only 4 days and 15 hours from the laying of its keel to its launching. As workers accumulated hands-on expertise, productivity in the labor force surged impressively. Completing the initial Liberty ships demanded around 1.1 million man-hours of effort. Yet by 1943, the typical figure per vessel had dropped to roughly 486,000 man-hours. At Kaiser's top-performing facilities, Richmond Yards 2 and 3, builders managed to finish ships in just 350,000 man-hours through the implementation of round-the-clock three-shift operations and extensive use of prefabricated components. Gains in cost control paralleled these advances in timelines. The earliest Liberty ships ran about $1.75 to $2.0 million apiece. In 1943, however, expenses had declined to $1.8 million each, even as wages and material costs climbed, a testament to heightened productivity and the benefits of accumulated know-how. Fully laden, every Liberty ship weighed in at 14,145 tons and had the capacity to haul 10,800 tons of goods. On one trip, these vessels could ferry 2,840 jeeps, 440 tanks, or 230 million rounds of ammunition. Propulsion came from triple-expansion steam engines, intentionally outdated in design yet dependable and straightforward to produce, enabling top speeds of 11 knots, sufficient for traveling in protective convoys. The pace of workforce development was no less impressive. In Kaiser's training programs, employees mastered targeted skills in an average of 2 weeks. Workers at Kaiser shipyards achieved proficiency as spot welders after a mere 10 days of instruction, marking the quickest training timeline. Roles demanding greater complexity, such as operating cranes or fitting ships, necessitated between 4 and 6 weeks of preparation. In stark contrast, conventional apprenticeships in the maritime trade demanded 4 years to reach basic skill levels and a full decade to attain mastery as a craftsman. The fundamental distinction lay in targeted expertise rather than broad-ranging instruction. Those in traditional programs gained knowledge across every facet of ship construction. By comparison, employees under Kaiser honed in on particular, repetitive operations that they executed repeatedly, often hundreds of times over. The combat attrition figures for Liberty ships underscored their reliability, even amid doubts regarding accelerated building methods. Out of the 2,710 Liberty ships constructed, roughly 200 fell victim to hostile forces, yielding a casualty percentage of 7.4%. This outcome stacked up advantageously against the pre-war depletion rates for merchant fleets, and confirmed that welding techniques, though eyed with initial distrust, yielded vessels capable of withstanding sea voyages. Certain ships did suffer breakdowns in their frameworks owing to flaws in the welding process. Specifically, 3 Liberty ships split entirely apart because of issues with brittle fracturing, accounting for just 0.11% of the total output. Across the entire Liberty Armada, close to 2,500 cases of notable brittle fractures surfaced, yet total ruptures remained exceptional. Such incidents prompted refinements in welding techniques and material standards for steel, which resolved the issue entirely by 1944. Metrics on endurance offered the strongest endorsement of the Kaiser methodology for building ships. Intended as stopgap measures with projected operational spans of 5 years, these Liberty ships displayed extraordinary resilience. A substantial number continued operating well into the post-war era, spanning multiple decades. The SS John W. Brown, constructed in 1942, continues to function as a museum vessel in Baltimore even in 2024, marking 82 years since its creation. Similarly, the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, another product of 1942 shipbuilding, stands preserved in San Francisco and took part in the 1994 events honoring the 50th anniversary of D-Day, making the journey to Normandy on its own steam after a half-century of service. A further example among these vessels, the SS Hellas Liberty, operates as a stationary exhibit in Greece. After the conflict ended, these Liberty ships often outlasted their intended operational periods by a wide margin. From the roughly 2,510 that made it through the war intact, about 835 stayed active in merchant fleets well into the 1960s. Numerous others found new owners overseas, continuing their voyages through the 1970s. The SS Albert M. Bow, recognized as the final Liberty ship to be completed and handed over on October 30, 1945, avoided the scrapyard through repurposing. Acquired in 1964 for $65,557, it transformed into the fish processing vessel Star of Kodiak the following year, and now endures as the grounded base for Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska, nearly 8 decades following its original assembly. The Liberty Ship Initiative left a profound mark on U.S. manufacturing sectors. Demands for vast quantities of steel spurred growth in fabrication facilities, especially along the Pacific seaboard, where Kaiser established the Fontana Steel Mill expressly to feed his maritime operations. Finished in 1942, a full 5 months before its projected timeline, this facility generated around 700,000 tons of steel each year and positioned California as a key player in national steel output for the initial time. Facilities under Kaiser's control also manufactured magnesium for use in fire-starting munitions and aluminum destined for airplanes, all forming part of a coordinated push to bolster wartime manufacturing. Waves of job creation swept across towns and cities in California, Oregon, and Washington, reshaping local economies. In Richmond, California, the population surged from 23,000 residents in 1940 to more than 100,000 by 1943, fueled solely by the demand for shipyard labor. In Oregon, Kaiser constructed the planned community of Vanport City, which rapidly rose to become the second most populous place in the state, housing over 40,000 individuals, all employed in shipbuilding operations or related sectors. Though these hastily assembled urban centers proved short-lived, they vividly illustrated how focused infusions of industrial capital could profoundly alter entire regions. An unforeseen outcome of Kaiser's expansive shipbuilding efforts was a breakthrough in medical services. In order to deliver health coverage to his enormous cadre of employees, Kaiser collaborated with Dr. Sidney Garfield to develop group-funded medical plans. These initiatives later matured into Kaiser Permanente, now among the nation's premier health maintenance organizations. The shipyard-originated system of advance-paid, proactive health care left a lasting imprint on U.S. medical systems for generations, and, by the opening of the 21st century, supported more than 12 million enrollees. The individuals who toiled in these yards transported the insights gained amid wartime urgency into long stretches of post-war success. For countless young workers, particularly women and people from underrepresented groups, the facilities offered chances to build skills that traditional job routes would have denied them entirely. Such experiences unlocked pathways that remained accessible throughout their subsequent careers. Advancements in technology from the Liberty Ship Initiative extended their reach well past the realm of naval vessel assembly. Methods of welding, honed amid the intense demands of conflict, evolved into everyday practices within the building of structural steel frameworks, the creation of oil processing machinery, and the production of high-pressure containers. Strategies for prefabricating components, first tested in Richmond, reshaped methods used in residential construction, the erection of bridges, and the setup of manufacturing plants. Core ideas around simultaneous manufacturing streams, streamlined design standards, and accelerated employee onboarding formed key pillars in the study and practice of production, oversight, and manufacturing design. In a 1985 examination of U.S. industrial strengths by Harvard Business School's Professor Michael Porter, the Liberty Ship endeavor stood out as a pivotal example of swift skill building at scale. Through his work, Kaiser proved that a nation's manufacturing prowess need not be static. It can surge into existence under the weight of pressing circumstances. When the United States joined World War II, its capacity for constructing merchant vessels remained severely limited. In just 2 years, shipyards across the United States were outpacing the global total in tonnage output. This achievement highlighted how infrastructure for industry, along with worker expertise and manufacturing methods, could advance at an astonishing pace through effective coordination. Such insights extend far past the pressures of conflict. They imply that apparent barriers to production power frequently stem from structural and mindset hurdles, not inherent material barriers. The shift in mindset sparked by the Liberty Ship Initiative among business leaders and technical specialists carried as much weight as the vessels themselves. Prior to the influence of Kaiser, those in charge of production adhered to established beliefs regarding output ceilings, necessary competencies, and operational frameworks. Kaiser illustrated that those beliefs might be flawed, and that exceptional outcomes demand challenging core principles. At its heart, the narrative of the Liberty ships serves as enduring evidence of a deeper reality concerning human potential and the frontiers of manufacturing. Although the vessels played a vital role in securing triumph for the Allies, their true importance lay in the revelations from their assembly. Everyday individuals, equipped with guidance and access, proved capable of remarkable feats. Items that once demanded prolonged artisanal heritage could now be assembled in mere weeks through streamlined techniques. Sectors that had clung to tradition for hundreds of years underwent radical overhaul in a matter of months, once urgency met ingenuity. In his 1960 memoir After the War, Admiral Chester Nimitz, who led the Pacific Fleet, contemplated the decisive role of U.S. seafaring output. We waged battles over 5,000 miles of the Pacific, sustained by vessels constructed more rapidly than adversaries could destroy them. Strategists in Japan's forces viewed America's manufacturing prowess as formidable yet bounded. They calculated that destroying sufficient numbers would ultimately cripple U.S. supply lines, compelling us toward talks. Adversaries overlooked the pivotal role of Henry Kaiser. By the year 1944, the United States was outpacing the destruction of its merchant fleet, constructing replacements at a rate that surpassed the rate of enemy sinkings. The calculus of sustained losses tilted decisively toward the faction capable of launching 3 vessels each day, rather than the one that managed to destroy only 2. It was sheer productive might, rather than battlefield courage, that ultimately shaped the war's resolution. Victory in the Pacific Theater owed as much to the bustling docks of Richmond, Portland, and Baltimore as it did to the fierce struggles on the shores of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Ultimately, Kaiser's most profound legacy lay not in the 1,190 vessels his facilities constructed, but in the profound shift he sparked in how industries perceived their own capabilities. The Robert E. Peary, assembled in under 5 days, served as irrefutable evidence that long-standing customs were not synonymous with inevitability, that established doctrines merited scrutiny, and that groundbreaking advancements demanded bold, unconventional methods. The shipping sector's leaders, who in 1940 had scorned Kaiser as a meddlesome novice lacking expertise, devoted years after 1945 to analyzing and adopting his innovative practices. The novice laborers trained in the arts of welding, assembly, and construction took those proficiencies and that newfound assurance with them into civilian jobs, fueling the reconstruction of the nation's economy in the aftermath of conflict. Methods born from the pressures of wartime necessity evolved into enduring benchmarks for efficiency, reshaping production processes in diverse sectors globally. At its heart, the tale of a single non-military innovator enabling the rapid emergence of Liberty ships, days rather than months, illustrates the power of exemplary change. It underscores how the most seismic shifts frequently arise from individuals unbound by inherited norms, how advancement hinges on challenging entrenched boundaries, and how people's innate abilities can surpass typical projections when marshaled effectively and spurred to action. The individuals toiling in Kaiser's yards were not exceptional beings. They were everyday folks delivering remarkable feats, thanks to a leader who trusted in their potential and devised frameworks that empowered them to realize it. This enduring insight, forged amid the clamor of Richmond's shipbuilding operations and affirmed by the delivery of 2,710 finished ships, holds timeless value for any field confronting obstacles that orthodox thinking deems insurmountable. Today's Liberty ships have largely vanished, dismantled long ago or sunk beneath the waves. Yet the upheaval they embodied persists in the operations of contemporary dockyards, in production lines that rely on modular assembly, in educational initiatives that prioritize rapid mastery of targeted competencies over gradual acquisition of wide-ranging knowledge, and in leaders who probe whether impossible signifies true impossibility or merely a puzzle awaiting solution. Henry Kaiser's lasting contribution endures not as a monument of iron, but as a profound shift in how we perceive the feats that committed individuals can achieve once liberated from conventional limits, and urged to pursue endeavors that specialists insist are unattainable. Beginning in December 1940, when he entered his initial agreement despite possessing no knowledge of ship construction, through to November 1942, when the Robert E. Peary set sail following under 5 days of assembly, and culminating in September 1945 with the handover of the final Liberty ship. Kaiser demonstrated that true industrial transformations arise not from gradual enhancements, but from a radical reconception of potential realities. Between 1941 and 1945, the construction of 2,110 Liberty ships did far more than transport goods over vast seas. These vessels embodied evidence that human creativity, released from the bonds of custom and fueled by urgent demands, possesses the power to realize what appears utterly beyond reach.